I never thought I'd be the kind of person who keeps spreadsheets on their marriage. But that's what happens when love slowly turns into a series of transactions. I met Jason when I was 29 at a rooftop networking event in downtown Chicago. I worked in private equity, the kind of job where you're always slightly tired but very well dressed. He was in medical device sales, charming, confident, the kind of man who made everyone feel like they were the only person in the room. He bought me a drink, made me laugh, and by the end of the night, he had my number and a dinner plan for the next week. It felt easy. We dated for about a year before getting engaged. Jason wasn't rich, not like the circles I moved in, but he was stable, ambitious. He had this quiet pride about him that I respected. And I liked that he didn't seem intimidated by my success, at least, not at first. We got married when I was 31. Small ceremony in Napa, about 60 people. I paid for most of it, which I didn't mind. I made more than him, significantly more. And I'd grown up with the mindset that if you have the means, you don't nickel and dime your partner. We signed a prenup. That part matters later. It wasn't anything extreme, just standard protections. What was mine before the marriage stayed mine. Anything we built together would be shared. Jason hesitated when I first brought it up. "Do you really think that's necessary?" he asked, sitting across from me at our kitchen island. "I don't think we'll ever need it," I said honestly. "But I'd rather have clarity now than resentment later," he eventually agreed. Though I remember the way his jaw tightened when he signed it. That was the first crack. The second came in the form of his mother, Diane. Diane lived in a suburb about an hour outside the city. Divorced, retired early, very particular. She had strong opinions about everything, how I dressed, how I spoke, how I carried myself. The first time I met her, she looked me up and down and said, "You're very polished." "I hope you're not high maintenance," Jason laughed it off. I didn't. Still, I tried. I brought gifts when we visited. Remembered her birthday. Invited her to brunch. She never warmed up to me, but she tolerated me, which I assumed was the best I was going to get. For the first 2 years of our marriage, things were mostly good. We bought a condo in River North. I covered the down payment. Jason handled smaller expenses, utilities, groceries. It felt balanced in a way that worked for us. Then Diane got sick. It started with fatigue. Then weight loss. Then hospital visits. Within a few months, she was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. I remember sitting in that sterile hospital room, holding Jason's hand while the doctor explained treatment options. Jason looked like someone had hollowed him out from the inside. After the doctor left, he just sat there, staring at the wall. "I can't lose her," he said quietly. I squeezed his hand. "We'll do whatever we need to do," and I meant that. The treatments weren't fully covered by insurance. There were experimental options, specialists out of state, procedures that came with 6-figure price tags. Jason didn't have that kind of money. I did. The first time I offered, he resisted. "I can't ask you to do that," he said. "You're not asking," I replied. "I'm offering." "She's your mom." He hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, but this is a loan. I'll pay you back." I didn't argue. Not because I expected repayment, but because I knew he needed to feel like he wasn't taking advantage of me. So I started paying. At first, it was manageable, $20,000 here, $50,000 there, flights to Houston for a specialist, private nursing care, medications that weren't covered. Then it escalated. One treatment alone cost $300,000. I wired the money without blinking. Jason cried that night, sitting on the edge of our bed. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You don't have to," I told him. "We're a team." For a while, that's what it felt like. I took time off work to help coordinate her care. I flew with them to appointments. I sat in waiting rooms, talked to doctors, handled insurance calls. Diane, surprisingly, softened a little during this time. One evening, while Jason stepped out to grab coffee, she looked at me and said, "I didn't think you'd stick around for something like this." I raised an eyebrow. "Why wouldn't I?" She shrugged weakly. "Women like you usually don't." I didn't know whether to take that as an insult or a compliment. "Jason's my husband," I said simply. "That's enough reason." She nodded, like she was reconsidering something she'd believed for a long time. Over the next year, I spent just over $2.7 million on her care. I I know the exact number because, like I said, I kept spreadsheets. Not because I was planning to use it against anyone, but because that's how my brain works. I track things. I organize. It's second nature. The treatments worked, at least for a while. Diane went into remission. It felt like we'd won. Jason threw a small celebration dinner at a steakhouse downtown. He toasted me in front of everyone. I wouldn't have my mom here without her, he said, his voice thick with emotion. She saved our family. Everyone clapped. Diane even reached over and squeezed my hand. For the first time, I felt fully accepted. I wish I could freeze that moment and live in it, because everything after that fell apart. It started subtly. Jason began working later, taking more calls outside. He became more guarded with his phone. At first, I chalked it up to stress. The past year had been brutal. Maybe he just needed space. Then one night, I saw a message pop up on his screen while he was in the shower. Can't wait to see you again. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't open it. I didn't scroll. I just absorbed it. When he came out of the bathroom, I was sitting on the bed, holding his phone. Who is she? I asked. He froze. For a second, I saw pure panic in his eyes. Then it shifted into something else, defensiveness, maybe even annoyance. It's not what you think, he said. That message seems pretty clear. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's just someone from work. It didn't mean anything. Did you sleep with her? A pause. That's not the point. Did you? Yes, I remember feeling strangely calm. How long? A few months. A few months. So while I was coordinating chemo treatments and writing six-figure checks to keep his mother alive, he was sleeping with someone else. Why? I asked, genuinely curious. He looked at me like the answer was obvious. You're never around, he said. You're always working, always busy, always in control. It doesn't even feel like I'm your husband half the time. I let out a quiet laugh. I literally spent the past year saving your mother's life. I didn't ask you to do all that, he snapped. I blinked. You didn't stop me either. He didn't respond. We sat in silence for a while. Finally, he said, I think we should separate. Just like that. No apology. No attempt to fix things. Just a clean, clinical suggestion like he was ending a business partnership. Okay, I said. He looked surprised. That's it? What do you want me to say? I thought you'd fight for this. I shook my head. You already made your choice. The divorce papers came 2 weeks later. He had already spoken to a lawyer. Filed everything. It was efficient at cold. I read through the documents at my office, sitting behind my desk. The city skyline stretching out behind me. He was asking for half of everything acquired during the marriage, including the condo. Shared accounts, investments, and this part made me pause. He listed the money I'd spent on Diane's medical care as marital support, not a loan, meaning, in his mind, it wasn't something he owed me, it was just part of being married to him. I closed the file and called my lawyer. Her name is Lauren. Sharp, direct, the kind of woman who doesn't waste time on pleasantries. I assume you want to fight this? She said after reviewing everything. Yes. Good, because this is aggressive. I leaned back in my chair. How aggressive can we be? There was a small pause. Very. What Jason didn't realize, what he never bothered to understand, was that the prenup he'd signed wasn't just some formality. It was detailed, thorough, and very, very specific. Everything I brought into the marriage remained mine. And since I had funded the majority of our lifestyle, from the condo down payment to the investment accounts, there wasn't as much shared property as he thought. But the real turning point came when Lauren asked me one question. Do you have documentation of the medical expenses? I almost laughed. I have everything, every wire transfer, every invoice, every email. Dates, amounts, recipients, tart $7 million neatly categorized. And you said he called it a loan at the time? She asked. Yes, any proof of that? I thought for a moment, then opened my email archive. There it was, an email from Jason. About 8 months into Diane's treatment. Subject line, I'll pay you back. I know I'll never be able to fully repay you for everything you're doing for my mom, but I promise I'll spend the rest of my life trying. Lauren smiled when I forwarded it. That helps, she said. The process took months. Depositions, financial disclosures. Negotiations that went nowhere because Jason was convinced he was entitled to more. At one point, he actually said, "You wouldn't even have a family without me." I stared at him across the conference table. "You wouldn't have a mother without me," I replied. That was the last time we spoke directly. In the end,
The court sided with the prenup. Jason didn't get half of everything.
not even close. The condo? Mine. I had paid for 80% of it, and the prenup protected that. The investment accounts? Mine, the joint account? Split, but it was a relatively small amount compared to everything else. And the medical expenses?
Not only were they recognized as separate contributions,
But the court also acknowledged the email as evidence of intent to repay. Jason didn't have $2.7 million, not even remotely close. So instead, he walked away with debt, a structured repayment plan that would follow him for years. I didn't do it out of spite. At least, that's what I told myself. But the truth is, when I signed those final papers, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Not because I won, but because I was finally free of a relationship that had quietly turned into something transactional, something conditional. Jason tried to call me once. A few weeks after everything was finalized, I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "I didn't think you'd go this far," he said. I listened to it once, then deleted it. Because the reality is, I didn't think he'd go that far either. But here we are.